Hello everybody, my name is Brady and we are back with another React video, and today we're going to be checking out more Hamilton. The song we have today is Hurricane. This is a really interesting subject, Hamilton's childhood. The hurricane is something that's really big and built up in the musical here, but Hamilton's childhood in general is a really interesting element that the musical and the book that inspired the musical really brought more to public discourse. Like, it was there, but it's not a part of Hamilton's life that was focused on as much until after that. Like, a good reason for that is with the Ron Chernow book, which a lot of you who are familiar with the musical are familiar with because it is the book that inspired the musical. Its depth on Hamilton's childhood is really good. And a lot of people don't like Ron Chernow and his style. He's been accused of being a little bit founders chic with this, in kind of a way you glorify the founding fathers, and you can have your criticisms of his writing and the way he's still a brilliant writer, and he does have some really good points. And one of the stronger points I find in that book is Hamilton's childhood. Just the amount of depth, it's just not something I've found in other biographies of Hamilton before that one. So I think he deserves a little bit of credit there, and that's why a song covering that would probably be one of the more interesting factors, because it's something very unique in the depth that Ron Chernow brought that to like kind of the forefront of Hamilton's psychology in a lot of ways. It's really, really interesting. So this should be a lot of fun. Let's get this started and see what sort of conversation can come out of that.
Of a hurricane, there is quiet for just a moment. A yellow sky. When I was 17, a hurricane destroyed my town. I didn't drown, I couldn't seem to die. I wrote my way out.
All right, so this is really painting the picture of the weather conditions that you could face living on a Caribbean island. I think that's a pretty simple layout here, but the imagery that it invokes is undeniably very strong. And I notice with a lot of Hamilton's personal writings, there is a little bit more referencing of his childhood, sometimes in like these moments of reflection. Like it seems like early on he doesn't really want to talk about it too much, because there is a little bit of I guess shame that comes from coming from elsewhere. I guess America's always been kind of xenophobic, even since the beginning, so I'm sure it's not something he'd want to talk about unless it's with people he'd generally trust. But there are moments where, like before the duel with Burr, he's thinking about his childhood a little bit more. He's thinking about the people who helped him to get where he is now. So in a moment like this, I wouldn't be surprised if there is some reflection going on here.
Wrote everything down far as I could see. I wrote my way out. I looked up and the town had its eyes on me. They passed a plate around.
And I cannot emphasize enough how strong of a writer Hamilton is. He's got a particular style to him that I don't always mesh well with, but I can't deny that he was really a brilliant writer. Just sometimes I end up like having to read the Federalist Papers, makes me want to just but a lot of his stuff, it's just, he could be poetic, and during his early life he sorry, plane going overhead, they always do. He actually dabbled in poetry, so kind of the beauty of his writing kind of reflects that sort of practice. Somebody who is familiar with writing more for beauty than practicality, and he could do both in a lot of ways.
Total strangers, moved to kindness, book passage on a ship that was New York bound.
So, we're not gonna just pretend that this is like a simple process of raising this money. A lot of this money is going to come from relatively important people. I believe the lady was Alexander Hamilton's cousin, who I believe that's how they're related. She was primarily one of the big fundraisers who helped to get him money to go to the mainland, get educated. And one of the big goals there was, okay, we send him to get his education, and maybe he'll go be a doctor, and then he'll come back here, and he'll help us here, because we could use a doctor. As we know now, Hamilton didn't go to be a doctor, and he did not go back. But he was definitely grateful for those who did help him. He was thinking about that as he got closer to his death.
I wrote my way out of hell. I wrote my way to revolution. I was louder than the crack in the bell. I wrote Eliza love letters until she fell. I wrote about the Constitution and defended it well.
The Liberty Bell, I think, that must be what he's referencing here. Hamilton would not know about the crack in the Liberty Bell because it didn't happen in his lifetime, I don't believe. I'm not sure exactly when that was. I think it might have been the 30s? 1830s? I should probably specify. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't believe Hamilton... It's one of those bits of trivia that I don't care that much about, but I don't think he would have... been familiar with the Liberty Bell in that sense.
And in the face of ignorance and resistance, I wrote financial systems into existence. And when my prayers to God were met with indifference, I picked up a pen, I wrote my own deliverance.
Referencing his prayers to God. That's interesting because we get to talk about Hamilton like as a religious founding father, because he was. Some even argue right now it's kind of a fashionable argument to try to make that he might have been Jewish. I personally don't buy that yet with what I know about him. He does have connections to somebody who may have been Jewish, but he was not fond of. His stepfather was, I think, Johann Michael Levein is how he spelled his name, but Hamilton in some of his early writings wrote his name Levine, and Levine has more Jewish implications there, and there's kind of like the idea that perhaps he changed the spelling of his name to hide his Jewish roots or something like that. But given Hamilton's poor connection with Levine or Levein, whatever he wanted to be, it's doubtful that that is the best way to go when making the argument that Hamilton would have been Jewish. I don't think he was Jewish, but he was more religious than a lot of other founding fathers. It seemed like with a lot of, not just the founding fathers, but people in general, he kind of had peaks and valleys of religiosity, and early on he was pretty religious. He might have been consumed by his work and let his faith become a little bit distant and not really focus as much on that. But then in moments of like tragedy, like losing his son, he kind of doubles down on his faith. Like, and as he starts to get a little bit older, he never got super old. Didn't get past 50, which, you know, oof, that's rough for your boy. But as he was getting older, he did reflect a little bit more on religion and stuff, and I would say he was more religious than a lot of founding fathers, especially more than people on the Jefferson wing, who were more in line with kind of the French Enlightenment ideals, and there was a little bit of atheism there, and I've had people make compelling arguments that Jefferson was actually just an atheist, and it's here or there with that. I think either Jefferson was an atheist who didn't really say it outright, or he was just very light on religion and had a very personal view of a god and didn't really fall into any perfect category of Christian. I don't know.
Eye of a hurricane, there is quiet for just a moment. A yellow sky. I was 12 when my mother died. She was holding me. We were sick and she was holding me. I couldn't seem to die. Wait for it, wait for it, wait for it.
Yeah, Hamilton's position early on was interesting because his mother came from money, but his stepfather ended up squandering a little bit of the money, and his father also came from, I believe it was a Scottish noble family, but he was kind of removed from them a little bit, just a little bit removed from their wealth. I don't know. I don't remember if he was like disgraced in some capacity or not. I don't even know if there's like a real answer for why he was removed from their wealth, but he was a deadbeat dad, so it's very possible that he just didn't have access to those resources, or maybe he just didn't feel like being a dad. Honestly, it's hard to say with Mr. James Hamilton.
I'll write my way down, write everything down far as I can see. I'll write my way out, overwhelm them with honesty. This is the eye of the hurricane. This is the only way I can protect my legacy. The Reynolds pamphlet.
Okay, so we're going to be going straight into the Reynolds pamphlet song, and that's a whole different can of worms there, so there's no way I'm going to be going into that in this one. We're going to save any discussion on that for its own video, but there is kind of the idea of him just overwhelming people with his arguments that is very true to Hamilton's character. He was, as we all know, very long-winded in the way that he argued things. He just tried to be very thorough in the way that he argued things, so it's natural that this is the route he would end up taking. It's very stupid from a political standpoint, but you can almost respect the honesty there, assuming it is entirely honest. I guess we'll go a little bit more into the depth of that when we get around to that video. But this is a very beautiful song. It's one of the more serious tracks in the musical. Even a lot of the more serious tracks will have the little bits of humor here. This one is it's very somber. It's very down to earth, and it really plays up the elements of Hamilton's youth, where there was struggle. And I think we have this very erratic childhood for Hamilton, because he had some times where he was doing okay, where he had his books, his mother was still around, things are going okay. His stepfather gets worse. They pretty much get cut off from that part of the family because Hamilton was Alexander. I have to specify which Hamilton we're talking about here, because Alexander is a bastard in this case, so that would, of course, cause a lot of tension there. And when he loses his mom, he ends up staying with some people who are kind of okay, and there is a guy who some people argue is actually Hamilton's real father, who ends up taking care of him a good amount. I'm not going to get into who Hamilton's real father is, because I honestly, your guess is as good as mine. But his childhood wasn't just all awful, but it's good to emphasize that it was erratic. It was all over the place. There was probably he was probably lacking that true feeling of stability, and who knows, maybe that could have influenced his way of approaching policy, because he did push for more government control than a lot of other people. He in a sense, stabilized the American economy. I don't know. Maybe that's a bit of a stretch, trying to do this sort of like Freudian, go all the way back to your childhood and the mother and all that, and how he was brought up and have that influence his policy. But, you know, there could be something there. We can only ponder because we can never truly be in his head. And even the few times we get in his head, he still feels like it's hard to reach. Even in his personal writings, I find him a little difficult to grasp. But, oh well. Thank you guys for watching. We'll be back pretty soon with some more Hamilton, and we're getting there. We're almost at the end. How many songs are left? I don't know. It feels like every time I come back, there's a new song in the musical or something like that, like they're multiplying. Like the end, it seems like it's getting closer, and then it just gets further away the more I do. I don't know what that is. I'm gonna have to actually get a number for how many more songs are left. All right, thanks for watching, and I will see you pretty soon with another video. All right.